In the harsh grip of marine captivity, a horrific story unfolds. Shamu and Namu, once kings of the deep, now ensnared by the harsh demands of the stage. Forced into a cruel ballet of tricks and stunts, their bodies were pushed to the limits, leaving their spirits broken. Confined within walls that offered no solace, their once mighty tails reduced to feeble flukes. Prepare for the chilling tale of two orcas suffering, masked for human entertainment. It's common knowledge that Hollywood is full of fake stories, overactive imaginations, and made-up fictional personas. But what happens when you discover that there's something much more sinister lurking below the surface? An outright deception that caused a tragic end to the star. And that star wasn't a famous actor, but rather an animal. This was Namu, an orca whose tragic real-life story sharply contrasted with the uplifting tale of Namu, my best friend. His life became a movie, celebrated and adored by many for decades. Yet just 2 weeks before the film premiered, Namu died due to horrendous living conditions, leaving a stark contrast to the gentle, playful creature on screen. His death was a brutal reminder of the impact of human decisions on killer whales. However, Namu's story doesn't end in tragedy, but rather it became a wake-up call, saving many of his kind from similar fates and transformed the world's perception of orcas. Namu was an adult male orca who lived a remarkable life, leaving a lasting impact on the way people viewed his kind. His story began in the waters of the Pacific Northwest in 1965, where he was born as a member of the C1 pod of the Northern Resident Community, a well-known Northern Resident orca pod in British Columbia. A few months after his birth, Namu's life took an unexpected turn. He was discovered entangled in a 22-foot salmon net near Namu, British Columbia, by a fisherman named William Leck-Kobit. This accidental encounter led to a life-altering change. Namu the Orca was subsequently sold to Ted Griffin, the owner of the Seattle Marine Aquarium, for $8,000. Griffin saw potential in this magnificent creature and decided to bring him to Seattle, a journey that took Namu 450 miles south of where he was. Ted Griffin's first encounter with Namu was astonishing. As Griffin approached the sea pen assembled for Namu's transport to Seattle, he saw the massive orca looming just 4 feet away. It was a moment that would define their bond. Namu made his presence known with a loud squeak, and Griffin responded with and in less than a second, Namu echoed back with a squeak of his own. The connection was immediate. It was a costly endeavor, but Namu's presence would soon prove to be worth it to Ted. When Namu finally arrived in Seattle on July 28, 1965, Griffin was greeted as a hero and even received a key to the city. In captivity, Namu's daily diet consisted of 400 pounds of salmon each day. He quickly became a star attraction at the Seattle Marine Aquarium, drawing crowds of fascinated people eager to witness this remarkable creature up close. The word of Namu's arrival spread like wildfire. People wanting to see him caused traffic jams for miles near Deception Pass Bridge. Namu was basically the first orca to perform in public. As time passed, Griffin saw that Namu needed a friend, so he brought a female orca named Shamu to be his companion. Shamu would later gain her own fame at SeaWorld in San Diego. Namu and Shamu's relationship in captivity brought even more attention to these incredible animals. In the weeks that followed, Namu became a sensation in Seattle. Thousands paid to catch a glimpse of the killer whale at Griffin's Seattle Marine Aquarium at Pier 56. The city was in the midst of Namu fever, and the craze didn't stop there. Around the world, people were captivated by the idea of killer whales as performing attractions, which led to a surge in the capture of killer whales from Puget Sound, the primary source of supply for orcas. Over a decade, from the mid-1960s to 1976, approximately 270 orcas were captured, with Puget Sound serving as a central hunting ground. Namu's extraordinary life didn't just capture the attention of only those who visited the Seattle Marine Aquarium. It also attracted Hollywood. In a turn of events that seemed almost like a script from a movie itself, Namu became the star of a Hollywood production that left a lasting impact on the way people perceived killer whales. It all began when Ted Griffin recognized the potential for Namu to be more than just an aquarium exhibit. Namu's presence and the ability to perform with humans in the water made him a unique and charismatic figure. Soon, he caught the eye of Hollywood producers. In the mid-1960s, the film industry was eager for new stories and fresh perspectives. Namu's life was seen as a unique opportunity to change the public's perception of killer whales. Until then, these animals had often been portrayed as vicious killers, similar to mindless and ruthless predators like sharks. However, Namu the killer whale aimed to change that narrative. The film was released in 1966 and offered a heartwarming and idolized story of a man and a heroic killer whale. While the film may have had its share of sentimentality, it played a significant role in shifting public perceptions of killer whales. The film starred Robert Lansing as Hank, a marine biologist determined to protect Namu from a group of small-town fishermen who feared the orca was ruining their salmon stocks and posed a threat to their community. Lansing's character attempted to fight the fear of orcas with scientific knowledge, highlighting that their relative brain size was larger than that of humans. It's a story about a marine biologist named Hank Donner. Hank was out camping in the Pacific Northwest, studying the underwater creatures that called those waters home. One day, as Hank and his local assistant were watching a group of gray whales swim by, something terrible happened. They saw two fishermen shooting at a bunch of orcas. One of them got injured and ended up on the shore, where she sadly passed away. Her mate, on the other hand, stuck around, mourning her loss. Hank wouldn't stand for the hunting of the second orca, and he managed to set up a net barrier to keep the cove safe. This male killer whale became the star, and they named him Namu after a song in the movie. The locals, except for one lady named Kate and her daughter, didn't trust Hank. As Hank watched over Namu, he started to play with him. As time went on, some of the local kids came to the cove, and they started feeding Namu. One day, a boy stuck a sharp hook into a piece of fish and gave it to Namu, which made him go wild. The whole town got wind of what happened, and they decided it was time to take matters into their own hands. They marched down to the cove, armed and ready to kill Namu. It looked pretty grim for our killer whale friend, but Hank figured out what was causing Namu's suffering. To prove that the orca was peaceful, Hank put on some swimming gear and jumped into the water with him. This sight started to change the minds of the angry townsfolk. After all this excitement, Namu was ready for a change. He met another group of killer whales, and they all swam away into the open sea. The film explained that the understanding and connecting with these creatures was possible, and that they were not the monsters some had believed them to be. The name Namu would later be used as a show name for various orcas and SeaWorld performances. Despite its impact, the film faced challenges, including the untimely death of Namu just 2 weeks before its premiere. This event undoubtedly dampened the initial excitement surrounding the premiere. Tragically, Namu's time in captivity was relatively short-lived. After the filming of Namu the Killer Whale concluded, Namu was returned to his small pen on Seattle's Pier 56. Unfortunately, this move proved detrimental to his health, and on July 9, 1966, he passed away. Griffin, despite mixed feelings, said that Namu had succeeded in a supposed break for freedom, which ultimately led to his death. However, an autopsy revealed that Namu had been suffering from an acute bacterial infection, skin rashes, breathing problems, and a stomach infection likely contracted from sewage runoff in Elliott Bay, where Griffin had relocated him. Despite Namu's untimely death, the impact he had on people was undeniable. Thousands of local fans mourned his passing, and the aquariums around the world were inspired to obtain their own captive orcas. Namu the Killer Whale was later renamed Namu My Best Friend and found a second life on television. It was played often for approximately 40 years. For centuries, the native people of the Pacific Northwest revered orcas, seeing them as family members and respected creatures of the sea. However, the newcomers, especially salmon fishermen who viewed orcas as competitors, these creatures were considered vermin and dangerous killers. This led to a disturbing chapter where orcas were hunted, mutilated, and even used for target practice by the U.S. Navy in Icelandic waters. Ted Griffin's decision to capture Namu alive marked a turning point in the understanding of killer whales. He saw Namu not as a threat, but as a companion and a friend. Namu's capture and subsequent interactions with Ted Griffin proved a unique opportunity to study and learn about these mysterious creatures. Griffin's encounters with Namu, which included touching and even riding the orca, were groundbreaking and captured the world's attention. But Ted blamed himself for Namu's death. and continued to work on helping orcas. In August 1970, he encountered a superpod of 90 to 100 orcas, possibly the entire southern resident population, captured behind nets. Realizing that he had more whales than he could safely handle, Griffin ordered most of them to be released, causing tensions with his partners and the fishermen involved. The Penn Cove capture marked a turning point. It led to public outcry, legal intervention, and eventually the end of orca captures in the United States. Was the price Namu paid worth it for saving his kind? Did Ted Griffin repay what he owed Namu? He supposedly loved him, but the animal died due to human error and a greed for entertainment. But let's take a look at another orca that was exploited for entertainment. When Shamu first debuted in SeaWorld, it was a show unlike anything that people had ever seen. A killer whale performing tricks, riding with trainers on its back, it was marvelous. The marine park had turned out to be a paradise of entertainment until one tragic day in 1971, when the ugly face of captivity revealed itself and Shamu attacked. Crowds watched in horror as the 9-year-old orca threw a young Anna Ekis off her back, then gnashed down on her leg for the kill. The star of the show had suddenly gone berserk, leaving everyone with a first-hand glimpse of a killer whale in relentless frustration. Anna was rescued just in time. Behind the paradise of entertainment lies a sordid tale of a beautiful beast of nature, and its life cut short only to please humans. This is an endearing story of the life of Shamu, the first performing orca of SeaWorld. For decades, the SeaWorld franchise has wowed crowds in Texas, Florida, and California, with their star attraction being the orca shows. The killer whales were projected as educational and awesome entertainment for families. So successful, in fact, that the name Shamu turned into a brand and a money-making machine. Yet the main character at the center of it all was always an unwilling participant. An orca who was wrenched cruelly from its home in the ocean to live in a nightmare, entertaining humans. It all goes back to a sunny October day in 1965. Ted Griffin was about to set off a mission he enjoyed the most, capturing baby orcas. Griffin had caught a few before, and the sight of seeing a juvenile writhe and thrash in a net while its mother lay bleeding was a thrill like no other for him. Shamu would often roam the waters of Penn Cove Puget Sound off Washington, and like every other day, she was with her mother. Griffin spotted the whales and seized his chance. The killer whale was no match for a seasoned whale hunter, and soon, Shamu found herself in a horrifying situation. These humans were hurling the sharpest weapons at her mother, who kept trying to protect her baby. There was very little that Shamu's mother could do except succumb to her grievous injuries. The large killer whale sank like a stone, leaving her baby at the mercy of a delighted Griffin. It was the beginning of a never-ending nightmare for Shamu. It may come as a surprise, but SeaWorld was never intended as a home for Shamu. SeaWorld did not even have performing orcas at the time of her capture. It was all a grand plan for the notorious Ted Griffin to make a mate for Namu, a male orca, which he kept at his Seattle Marine Aquarium. Namu was a massive 6.5-meter bull sold to Griffin for $8,000, who showcased the orca as his most prized exhibit in an open pen at Warriors Cove, part of his Seattle Marine Aquarium. Unfortunately, Namu displayed signs of unfathomable stress, often emitting terrifying screams the entire night. Griffin decided that a female mate might just calm him down, and that mate turned out to be Shamu. From the vast expanse of the ocean, Shamu found herself suddenly thrust into a small 3-sided pen, about 12 by 18 meters and 6 meters deep, kept afloat by empty oil drums. Even worse was how she had a stranger for company. She was not used to being around males because she was still young and always roamed alongside her mother. Shamu missed her mother often, crying and wailing just like Namu. What made things worse was how the pen bordered the open ocean. The appearance of free whales who frequently visited in solidarity with their captured mates only made things worse. Shamu rejected Namu from the start. He was not going to share a small space with a huge male and often fought with him. Griffin's master plan for future breeding was dashed. Realizing his mistake, he sold Shamu to SeaWorld San Diego, and a new era in marine entertainment was born. SeaWorld, the brand new attraction at Rock, California, was promoted as a marine lover's paradise. Founded in 1964, it encompassed all 22 acres along the shores of Mission Bay and became a resounding success within a few days of its inauguration. The appearance of Shamu at SeaWorld skyrocketed the popularity of the marine entertainment company. Seeing small sharks, large turtles, and performing dolphins was one thing, but seeing a giant orca up close was a mind-blowing experience for many, except Shamu. From Griffin's hellhole to SeaWorld, it was like jumping from the frying pan into the fire for Shamu. Her living space at SeaWorld was no better than the Pennant Warrior's Cove. This was just as small and as claustrophobic. Shamu had now grown to 1,700 feet long, yet the tank she was housed in was just 20 feet by 30 feet. If Shamu stood vertically in the pool, the water would never cover her entire body. It was solitary confinement of the worst kind. From an unwilling mate to a male orca to a performing one at SeaWorld, Shamu's transition was not an easy one. SeaWorld was a completely alien environment. While she loved the water, she loved the feel of being able to swim, roll, and jump in the performing tank larger than hers. She was often puzzled why the humans poked, prodded, and forced her to do things she never wanted to. She didn't know how. Training to interact and perform stunts with humans was a nightmare for Shamu. She was scolded if she didn't oblige. She was starved and soon learned to associate cooperation with food. SeaWorld was ecstatic. Shamu became a celebrity. She was featured on billboards, the subject of TV shows, and of course, the crowds. How the groups loved her, and each time she surfaced out of the water with a human standing on the tip of her nose. The group would go berserk and echo and chant, "Shamu, Shamu." Everyone was happy. SeaWorld was raking in millions, but everything was not right with Shamu. She was falling into depression. SeaWorld was oblivious to the mental and physical harm to the orca. Instead, the standalone marine parks soon opened more franchises in Orlando, Florida, Ohio, and San Antonio, Texas. More parks meant a demand for more orcas, and soon, several more juveniles were captured by men like Griffin and sold to SeaWorld. Shamu performed at SeaWorld for 6 years, but all was not right with the female orca. She was just 9 years old, but already showing signs of distress. SeaWorld shrugged off all concerns, attributing Shamu's actions as normal stress. They failed to recognize how Shamu was reaching a breaking point, and desperation would soon turn to an attack. On April 19, 1971, Gail McLaughlin, SeaWorld's public relations director, and Kent Burgess asked SeaWorld's secretary, 22-year-old Anna Eckes, if she wanted to ride Shamu. They thought it would be an incredible publicity stunt, showing off how safe killer whale shows could be. McLaughlin and Burgess were naive and had no idea such actions could go wrong. Captive killer whales may be trained and obedient, but one thing not taken into consideration is their unpredictability. Moreover, such wild creatures view only trainers as masters, and their cooperation and loyalty are only directed at such individuals. Making them interact with a stranger is just asking for trouble, but it was arranged, and unsuspecting and excited Anna happily agreed. Anna was no novice to water. She was a trained scuba diver and an excellent swimmer, but interacting up close with a killer whale is an entirely different ballgame. Anna was warned before the stunt that it was a risk. Things could go wrong and she could fall off, but not in her wildest dreams did she envision an attack. Anna changed into a diving suit and got into the water with Shamu. Everything appeared normal. Anna followed all her cues and Shamu seemed to cooperate. Soon, Anna got onto the orca's back and raised her hand, smiled and waved to the crowd. As Shamu began swimming towards the deep end of the pool, disaster struck. One swift stroke, Shamu tossed Anna off, launching her into the water. Driven by instinct, years of depression and trauma, Shamu unleashed her rage on Anna. With her enormous teeth, Shamu grabbed the girl's leg and clamped down. Anna was trapped, and Shamu refused to let go. Anna screamed. She was in shock and could not believe what was happening. Why would Shamu attack her? If Shamu was not closer to the pool's edge, it might have been a terrifying tragedy for SeaWorld. Nonetheless, all the excitement and joy soon turned into horror as the crowd watched the star orca drag Anna Eckes around in her mouth. Fortunately, other trainers sprung into action in attempts to distract the killer whale. By now, the water was turning red with the blood from Anna's ankle. Shamu's teeth were embedded in her flesh and clamped shut like a vice. Soon, one of the trainers had the idea of driving the pool into the orca's mouth, forcibly prying her jaw open. The tactic worked, allowing Anna to break free. Anna was then taken to safety as Shamu swam around in circles in her pool, oblivious to what she had done. The crowd was all shocked and silent, and the terror turned into some iconic reprieve for Shamu. Her performing days were over.
I was so afraid I was going to drown. And because she would dive and go down, and I didn't know how long she would, be down there.
As for Anna Eckes, the girl suffered a horrible deep gash that required 100 stitches. In the same year, Anna sued SeaWorld for fraud, negligence, and liability for an animal with vicious or dangerous propensities. She was awarded $17,500 in damages, and SeaWorld's appeals for a non-suit and a new trial were denied. Even though Shamu was retired from performing, her life was worse than ever. The stimulation of performing was denied. She was made to live in her puny little tank, and the trauma took its toll. By the end of 1971, Shamu contracted a severe uterine infection, which did not respond to treatment. Too fragile and ill, she died of septicemia and was just 9 years old. In contrast, a free orca in the ocean can live to almost 90 years old, the average being 80. Shamu's death did not mark the end of SeaWorld shows. The marine park has tasted billions and will never pass that up. A new orca, Helena, the first to be born and survive in captivity, adored the mantle of Shamu, and the show continued. Was it right of SeaWorld to establish a live performing band that involved the suffering and captivity of a beautiful animal? We have our thoughts reserved, but maybe another orca's tale could give the answer, shown on screen.